It's not my first time in a 40% symposium. I think I have been attended quite a few in the past, also in Germany. So it's a big pleasure for me and an honor to be here with you. I don't know if I'm lucky or unlucky to come now in this time slot to present just after that, the previous panel, but I think I'm lucky not to be in the previous panel. I'm not a policy maker. I'm advising the department, which means that I cannot defend some of the policy of the department. And of course, I cannot comment on anything that the Secretary of State said today, good or bad. There are others to comment on that. But I will be focusing on the work we've been doing with the energy efficiency policy teams, the business energy use team, and the local energy use team. The challenges we're facing, if you like, the opportunities are out there, and how we go about, or thinking about go in the market and help private sector incentivize energy efficiency uptake. As I said, and as was said, I will be focusing on commercial real estate. Energy efficiency is not just about, of course, commercial real estate. Is also about process and transportation. Other things you can do there, you can combine policies, of course. I'll start with a few words because it's important to understand the bigger framework on the EU policy landscape. Then a bit of background and understanding, if you like, of the UK non-domestic, basically the commercial building stock. Then I'll focus on the barriers to energy efficiency implementation, to energy efficiency uptake. A lot of things have been said from previous presenters, so I'm not going to go into detail on all the things that I have in the presentation, but I'll be focusing on those that were not mentioned. Then two small examples. There are plenty of policy examples that could be used, but I believe two examples that show how you can go about incentivizing energy efficiency. One is more a stick approach, which is more the so-called PRS, private rental sector regulation, focus on the non-domestic. I'll highlight the main points. The second is, I think we had the presentation, a very good presentation before, with some criticism as well in some of the slides, well taken, on the business energy efficiency tax review and how a tax system can incentivize, so a more carrot, if you like, approach in terms of policy making energy efficiency, and the current consideration within DEC and some of the work that we're being doing there, obviously to incentivize private sector to do more in energy efficiency. So a few words about the the EU policy landscape. If you like, there are basically two major pieces of EU legislation, or if you like, directives, to put it correctly, that direct and influence policy making in all member states, including UK, of course. It's the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and the only thing we should mention here is that it applies to new construction, not so much to existing, and to major building renovation. It affects, if you like, building codes, and also it relates to the energy performance of rating of buildings. And the second one, which is, I think, a bit more important in our context, is the Energy Efficiency Directive. And because it sets a target for energy saving, which is important to all member states, by 2020, it requires all member states to develop a national level action plan in order for them to decrease the energy consumption, the annual energy consumption in their buildings. It also requires the public sector to act on the public real estates in terms of, it sets certain levels, renovation levels. And also it targets SMEs. I think it was mentioned before, SMEs are really a particular business, a particular segment, if you like, of the economy that has not been addressed well by existing regulation, existing policies. Now, this is this slide. This, if you like, this graph is based on a recent research done by the European Climate Foundation. It was commissioned by the European Commission, and what it says, and I know it might look a bit complicated, is that based on the adapted policies, we need to do more in order to be able to reach the saving targets that have been agreed and have been set by the Energy Efficiency Directive. So basically, there is if you like, there is a policy gap, and maybe some of the policies that have been implemented the last few years might have addressed that gap, but not the whole gap. So I would expect more policies to come in and target deep retrofits of buildings rather than, as it is the case today, to do like more shallow retrofits in terms of focusing on the low-hanging fruits, the stuff like lighting, or even, if you like, light energy management. I think going forward, if we want to meet the targets and if we want to become energy efficient, we need to be focusing, especially on the existing building stock, of course, on deep retrofits. That is why I would expect more policies, not just on a UK level, but on a European level, to be implemented, policies that will have, if adopted, they will end up in substantial energy savings. So I wouldn't expect the policy making environment, or if you like, the regulation framework, not to stay as it is. I would expect more things to come. So I cannot reveal what is going to come, but I can say that work is being carried out not just in the UK level, but also the European one. And some of the things that Stephen mentioned before in his presentation, also the EU is working closely with financial institutions to identify ways of accelerating, if you like, energy efficiency uptake. Now, a background to the UK non-domestic commercial building sector, if you like. I think, as mentioned before, we're talking about more than 1.8 million business premises, buildings that are used for business purposes. Obviously, we all know that. There's nothing new here. There's significant socially cost-effective energy-saving potential in all the buildings. And if that potential is being realized, obviously, that will help UK to meet its carbon and mandatory carbon energy-saving targets, and also help create a new jobs, if you like, a new economy in the supply chain, and improve also from a business perspective their productivity. Again, very difficult to assess how that productivity will be improved, but as we had the previously presentation by Ben, and I think we're going to that direction where energy saving will be, at the end of the day, will be correlated with the productivity enhancement. Some, if you like, summarized information on the UK non-domestic building stock. I don't want to say a lot of things. There are some obvious, if you like, conclusions, but if you like, in terms of size, the majority of the buildings that are being used for retail purposes rather than offices. And as you would expect, the big buildings like warehouses and factories, even though they occupy a lot of space, they don't, relatively to their size, they don't using so much energy. This is an important, if you like, slide in terms of what it tries to show. Business energy use in accounts more or less for around 40. These are statistics that I got from the Department of Energy and Climate Change. Maybe they're not. They're 2 or 3 year old. Maybe there might be some changes, but more or less it says that the majority, more than 45% of the energy is being used in of the total UK energy consumption is being used in businesses. However, that represents only 3% of the total overheads. Now, in some businesses, this might not be the case. Might be 5, 10, or even more than that. But that shows that it shows that energy is not as important as it is in terms of for the senior management, if you like, because it doesn't represent a big overhead cost. And I think to solve the problem, we can do one small thing: increase the energy price. But obviously, this is not feasible. And I think what we need to do is to pass from a discussion. I think a previous speaker said exactly the same thing, and I'm not going to say something new. The discussion shouldn't be focusing on the savings, should be focusing on the corporate benefits. So instead of talking to the energy managers who understand the benefits, we should go back and try to have the same discussion on a much higher level to the, if you like, CEO, CFO level, and try to explain to them the benefits, the corporate benefits, the economic benefits that derive from an energy efficient business. Another important, if you like, parameter is that more or less, if you like, if we exclude the large business consumers, the rest of the energy might be even more than 50% is being consumed by SMEs, which is a sector that is not being, in general, there is a tendency to engage more with big corporations, big corporates, which makes perfect sense. However, a lot of SMEs are to be accountable for the energy that's being consumed, and there's an issue with the SMEs, and that issue is more related to their size, their understanding of the energy efficiency potential. So going forward, I would like to highlight a few barriers related to SMEs in particular, because if we don't address that barriers, we're not addressing 50% of the problem. And now to barriers, as I explained before, I didn't know that Stephen would speak about it, so I'm not going to say a lot of things about this report, more than I was also a member of the working group, which means that I'm proud of the work that has been done here, and most importantly that I will recommend you to have a look at it, because it highlights, if you like, in a high-level scale, the major barriers for energy efficiency uptake. I'm going to go in more detail in some of these barriers in the next slide. So what about the general market barriers to energy efficiency uptake? Those market barriers obviously apply to buildings as well. The first barrier, nothing new, it's easy to understand, is the barrier of the misaligned financial incentives. And we're not talking just about the tenant and the landlord, if you like, relationship, obviously, but we're also talking about the relationship between those who are maintaining the kit, maintaining the equipment in a building, and those who are procuring stuff for a business. So they might not have the same language, they might not have the same objectives. If you like, they are looking things differently. The same applies, as we explained before, in the relationship between the energy managers and the financial directors. The energy managers have a totally different, more technical language when they want to present, if you like, a business case for energy efficiency, whereas the financial directors are expecting to hear something about return on investment, payback, economic benefits, and so on. The second barrier, again, it was mentioned in a very detail in the previous presentation, and there's nothing more to say than standardization really matters, and the lack of standardization is making difficult for projects to, as well as the fact that there are misaligned financial incentives to access corporate finance. And so what do we mean by accessing corporate finance? A lot of people think that this means that there is lack of liquidity, lack of money around. This is not true. If we have people from financial institutions here, the first thing they would say, we have money, but no projects are coming to the pipeline, and it might be very difficult actually to finance these projects because they look too complex for us. So it's still an embryonic market. There is a lot of complexity, if you like, and some of the products that are available are not well suited for energy efficiency. So in essence, the financial institutions could finance energy efficiency projects, but they're not seeing projects coming through the pipeline, or not the right projects. Now, some specific barriers that apply to SMEs in particular, additional to what I mentioned before, and these are the barriers that we have identified in the department when I'm working with policy teams. So these are kind of the things, if you like, we want to understand how we go about overcoming. So these are things that DEC as well has identified. The first and more important, because of their size, they don't have the resources, the skills, the expertise, if you like, to develop proper business case. Obviously, their focus is on crucial projects, those that matter, those that affect, if you like, directly operations, and they don't have the time, and their attention is limited to focus on energy and energy efficiency in general. The second, and equally important, is that they have a lack of knowledge and understanding of what energy efficiency is all about. They're unaware of their energy use. They lack of performance data. They don't understand how much they consume, why they consume as much. They don't understand that there are some incentives out there. They can policy incentives, financial incentives for them if they were to go and procure an energy efficiency project. And obviously, they don't have the right knowledge to identify cost-effective opportunities in energy efficiency, and that leads, obviously, and that is, if you like, a vicious circle, to lack of senior management buy-in, because, as I said before, it's not front or in their mind, not in front of mind. They have other prioritizations. They're looking for projects that, they think energy efficiency has a very long payback period, so they're only concentrating their efforts on low-hanging fruits, if you like, and they haven't seen or they haven't been presented with the right corporate benefits. Some challenges that are, or barriers that are particular to the non-domestic building stock. One thing that anyone can say is that the non-domestic building stock, the commercial building stock, is very complicated. It's not. The fact is that it's very, there is a multiplicity, if you like, in the building stock. It is heterogeneous. We're talking about shops, offices, warehouses, small, big sizes. It's very difficult to match metering data with, actually with the building types due to some complex addresses. Obviously, some energy meters are actually reporting data for the whole building, and maybe the building has mixed use, residential, retail, and even office, and we haven't broken down the uses per meter, as an example. There are certain outliers out there who are skewing the results, and we're not getting the right information we want. Again, important to have quality data in place. You need to approach the whole aspect in a very targeted and segmented approach. There is no cookie-cutter solution, one solution that can fit or can address every problem. And an important aspect, which I don't think it was kind of mentioned before, and I think it's a critical aspect, if we're to include the tenant in the solution mix, we need to have good operational performance data. So we need to rate as well the performance of the tenants. Without that, the tenants, at the end of the day, they're not going to understand if they're good occupiers or not. So I think from the one side, you have the energy performance certificates who are more targeting the as-built energy efficiency and are more like the landlords, but we need also to do a lot of work to understand what the tenants are doing in terms of how they are using the buildings. And if you like, a more specific, to a more specific barrier, to a more specific matter is the business case development. I have mentioned that, the business case development, a lot of times before. A proper business case is complex. So it needs to focus on things that have to do with the financial structuring, on the internal rate of return, I think to a lesser extent the payback periods, highlight all the additional corporate benefits related to risk mitigation, compliance, corporate social responsibility, branding, other investment aspects. Otherwise, it would never gain the senior management buy-in. So I think someone needs to provide that technical assistance support, those resources to those who really need it to be able to understand why they need to go about developing a proper business case. Because the lack of a proper business case, I think, ends up to the lack of senior management buy-in and then to difficulty in accessing corporate finance. And I think the initiative that Stephen spoke about, the Investor Confidence Project, definitely, and the standardizing some of those processes would play a massive role. And so these are the kind of initiatives that could help or could support, if you like, a proper business case development in energy efficiency. A few words, not a lot of things to say, but I just want to highlight two policies that are affecting buildings. One is more, as I said, more the non-domestic PRS regulation is, if you like, I think it's one of the most interesting pieces of legislation. This is the first piece of legislation that would make landlords to act, and is one of those pieces of legislation that addressing one of the key barriers, which is as I said before, the tenant-landlord relation, the misaligned financial incentive between the tenant and the landlord, because now it's a landlord's obligation to act, and all the property scope. Or the commercial properties in scope need to reach a minimum EPC rating or above to be lettable, and that affects new and renewed leases from 1st of April 2018 and all leases from 1st of April 2023, which means now it's not about energy saving, it's not about energy efficiency, it's all about marketability. It's all about, this is where the senior management will start getting interested, because or the landlords, if you like, those who own property, because if they don't do anything, they might end up with an empty building, which at the end of the day, they might end up demolishing. There are some, if you like, exceptions to this regulation, but I'm not going to speak about that. What is interesting is to see how many buildings will be affected today based on the current energy performance standards. We could discuss about the, if you like, the how effective the energy performance standards are, or how effective the implementation of the energy performance standards is. But assuming that everything goes well and the implementation is great and we like our standards and our certification standards, more or less 20% of all commercial buildings will be affected. That is, if you look around on the existing building stock, it means that 1 out of 5 buildings will be affected. And assuming that that relates only to those buildings that are today rated F or G, imagine those that are rated E. They have that risk of being close to the minimum standard, which means that it might not be as marketable as they were before. And if you think that in the future, maybe if we are to review that, and that needs to happen by 2020, review the existing regulation, there must be a trajectory for the future. So maybe in the future you might say those buildings that are rated E, I'm not saying has been discussed yet, but it's part of the discussion, it will be part of the discussion. Then, it's not going to be just that 20%, it might affect more than 20% of the building. So this is a massive opportunity, and I think this is a good piece of legislation that shows how you can motivate and how you can create demand without basically using any financial stick as an approach. And some of, if you like, I would like to highlight some of the implication for property owners and tenants. Obviously, this piece of regulation will affect letting and rental income, not just because of the void periods, but because we're talking about better billing. So in rent reviews, you might have positive impacts on rents for those who have done the job. Also, because of the upfront cost, it might affect, at the end of the day, business plans and return on investments. There will be issues on the service charge. Is there going to be an impact, if you like, any potential cost liabilities for tenants just because the landlord has put money in the building? As I said before, the marketability, the commercial marketability of the building for sale purposes. Tenant retention, this is important because if you improve your building, you might actually incentivize your tenant to stay in the building, and obviously the big risk of obsolescence for those who are not going to do anything. I think we discussed about that before, but so I'm not going to go into detail, and I'm not going to answer to any of the good comments that were mentioned before. But what I want to highlight, this is on this, if you like, policy initiative, is the carrot approach. So again, we spoke about that before, so no reason for me to go into detail. What I wanted to highlight is that what is being considered in this, and I think to your question why HMT was leading, is I think was answered because at the end of the day, tax collection and tax revenue comes back. It was all about that discussion. I think DEC has played a big role. It's a joint team between DEC, HMRC, BIS, and of course HMT. And DEC has played a critical role in acting as a subject matter expert. And I think there is respect for the input we have. Not personally, but the department has contributed. I'm helping the team on assessing the results of the response, and I think we had quite a good feedback, 330 responses to the consultation. So I'm assessing a little bit if you like, the incentives part, and that's what I'm going to speak about. So one of the things that was considering was open-ended, so we didn't want to define what we mean by incentives, and we wanted to get that feedback from the industry, was how we go about improving the policy effectiveness in terms of incentivizing, if you like, energy efficiency. And we got quite, I think, on the workshop, at least I attended before the end of the consultation, I think the feedback was quite diverse, but quite useful. And we'll open up another discussion, because as it was said before, real estate was not part of this. So it was more focusing on businesses. So I think real estate, the fact that real estate was not part of it, I think will open up probably another round of discussions at some point. And to kind of finish, if you like, my presentation, it's the end of the day afterwards, some policy consideration. When we're talking about policy in general, we need to understand the specific parameters and the criteria. we need to consider before reaching to any results. So I'm not going to teach you about that, but what I want to say is that unfortunately or fortunately, you need to be, you're in essence confined between certain criteria. But at the end of the day, you need also to consider things that have to do with the simplicity to business, to government administration, the easiness in terms of deliverability, the likely additionality with existing other existing policies, and who are we going to cover? Which sectors are we going to cover? Then there shouldn't be no winners, and there shouldn't be any losers, but we should focus on those that really matter. And to kind of conclude, if you like the work we'll be doing now, it's more a step-by-step. We're following a step-by-step approach, but we should be working in parallel, because the first and most important thing, if we want to accelerate and incentivize private investment, is we need to be focused on how we go about accelerating demand. And to do that, we need to basically create the right tools. We should disseminate and share trusted information. We should, issues might not be the best. There might be criticism the way it has been implemented, but still it creates that. I think what issues is, and all those mandatory audit schemes could be, they create that opportunity. The opportunity is being recognized, and that is very important, because without that report, you wouldn't know that you can save. So I think we have seen some action just because some organizations are now understanding the potential. Of course, the business case development aspect and the senior management buy-in aspect as well. And I think to do that, the government, in one sense or another, needs to support technical assistance. The second and most important is we need to aggregate the pipeline. So, okay, we created the demand. So what? If we've created a series of projects that are not standardized, are not segmented, they don't have the proper right risk management tool in place, they're not procured in the right way, you might end up, with a pipeline of projects that cannot be implemented. And the third step would obviously be the project implementation step, which is, I think here you need to support, if you like, and encourage market-based delivery models. At the same time, you should also think, and now I'm going to go back to how government can support financial instruments, of the self-instruments, that will target energy efficiency, but will mostly leverage existing state funds that are available for business, and actually also European funds that are available and not being used for energy efficiency purpose, but they could, because part of their mandate, like the European Development Regional Funds that are out there and could potentially support especially technical assistance. And of course, probably some of you know, the IB-related funds like EFSI, which is the European Fund for Strategic Investments, who is providing some risk-sharing guarantees. And banks definitely have to play a significant role and provide the right products to end up with what we all want, which is basically energy and carbon savings and productivity enhancement. And to conclude, I leave the last remarks to the experts. I'm not the one. Thank you.